Grace and peace, grace and peace. Rev C here. And in this brief video, if you're watching it later, I want to deal really quickly with dealing with disagreements. Coming from the book of the letter to the Philippians, dealing with disagreements, because we know disagreements are going to arise in the Christian church and in the community, and even in your everyday relationships. So we want to look at how can the gospel help us deal with disagreements. And so when Paul wrote the book of Philippians, he was well aware of a serious division going on in the ranks. The fellowship was fractured. But we can tell that doctrine doesn't seem to have been the cause. Rather, the church is being torn apart in Philippi by difference arising from rivalry, self-interest, mutual animosity, pride. And so when we get to chapter 4, the problem then bubbles to the surface. Two women were disagreeing, and people in the church were apparently taking sides and dividing. And Paul, must have wondered, can our partnership in the gospel survive? And Paul addresses both these women by name. That's very important. Can you imagine being known, forever ensconced in history as, having your beef brought to the front? Paul begs them to be of the same mind in the Lord, to reach agreement with each other if possible, and if not, at least set aside any self-seeking attitudes that they may have had toward each other and replace it with this self-giving attitude in chapter 2, verses 5 through 11. So I want to give us a few principles that we can apply whenever we disagree with our fellow believers. But let's read the text, Philippians chapter 4. We'll look at 1 through 3. Therefore, my brethren, my adelphoi, loved and longed for, my joy and my crown, in this way stand firm in the Lord. I urge Judea and I urge Synecdoche to keep the same mind, to think the same mind. Indeed, I ask you also, genuine companion, help these women who have contended together alongside of me in the gospel. Paul uses this word, sunalatheo, which occurred here and in chapter 1, and he wants to help these women think the same way as a part of being unified. He said, you guys were unified in the past. You just need to be reminded and urged to do this again. With also Clement and the rest of my fellow workers, whose names are in the book of life. So, quickly, number 1, how can we overcome or deal with disagreements? Disagreements are inevitable, even among the godly. If we are going to have relationship with others that's based on honesty and truth and transparency, there's going to be disagreements. Opinions and viewpoints are going to differ. Spirit-filled people will not always see eye to eye. A perfect example, Acts 15, Paul and Silas. So there's going to be disagreements, even among the godly. Number 2, in every agreement, there are 2 separate ingredients. In every agreement, there are 2 separate ingredients. There's an issue and there are convictions. The issue involves principle, while the convictions involve preferences. There's an issue, there are convictions. Issues involve principles, convictions involve preferences. There are some convictions that all believers have because those are the foundational truths of Christianity. But in many other areas, we will see things differently. And so the point is that we can still work in harmony with people whom we disagree with on these matters. Number 3, in most, if not all disagreements, each side will have valid points. And sometimes that is difficult for us to acknowledge. It's difficult for us to acknowledge and value the other point of view of others because we're so invested in our own opinions, right? And so Paul urges the Philippians in verse 5 of chapter 4 to be forbearing. He means that we have to stop being willing. We need to be willing to stop talking and begin to listen to others. Meet them halfway if we can, and not always insist that it's our way or the highway. And so there's the Greek word in verse 5 there. You can translate it as big-heartedness. The idea is of one of sweet reasonableness, magnanimity. If we have such an attitude of big-heartedness, reasonableness, we will be less likely to make an obstinate stand for what we believe is right. And when we're involved in a disagreement, we will work at seeing both viewpoints. Number 4, when both sides of an issue have good support, we should seek a wise compromise. For Paul and Barnabas to have done that would not have meant heresy. No doctrine was involved in their decision whether or not they should take John Mark on the second journey. Paul could have said, hey, let's take Mark on probation. If it doesn't work out, we'll send him home. Barnabas could have said, let's give Mark a minor assignment to see how he does. So again, there was no doctrinal issues there. So remember, a wise compromise is not necessarily a sign of weakness. Paul urges them to work with these women to restore harmony and amenity. The relationship was important. And then lastly, finally, if the conflict persists and the issue cannot be resolved, graciously agree to disagree. Don't slam the phone down. Don't give other people the silent treatment. Don't storm and stomp out of the room. Remember that God can still use both sides to advance the gospel. God can still use both sides to advance the gospel. Well, this has been Rev C here with a brief teaching Bible study on dealing with disagreements and the power of the gospel and the necessity of unity, partnership in the gospel. I pray this has been a blessing to you. God bless you. God keep you. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you on the next video.